The moment I saw my fiancé's name on that fraudulent insurance claim sitting in a stack of documents on my boss's desk, I knew my perfect life was about to crumble. But I had no idea that the woman I'd trusted to plan our dream wedding had orchestrated the most devastating betrayal I could imagine. Before I tell you how I exposed an elaborate criminal network that destroyed dozens of families, including my own, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. My name is Sarah, and 18 months ago I thought I had it all figured out. I was 34, working as a claims adjuster for Pinnacle Insurance in Denver, engaged to David, a successful physical therapist who made me laugh until my sides ached. We'd been together 3 years, living in his gorgeous townhouse in Cherry Creek, planning a wedding that would be the culmination of everything I'd ever dreamed about. That's where Elena Vasquez came in. Elena ran Enchanted Moments Wedding Planning and came highly recommended by 3 different venues. She was in her early 40s, impeccably dressed, with this warm maternal energy that made you feel like you were her only client. During our first meeting, she listened to every detail of our vision, took extensive notes, and somehow quoted us a price that was 30% less than her competitors. "I believe every love story deserves a perfect beginning," she said, her dark eyes sparkling with what I thought was genuine joy. "And I can see how much you two adore each other." David was smitten immediately. "She gets it," he said as we drove home. "She understands that this isn't just a party, it's the foundation of our whole future." I should have wondered why someone so talented was so affordable. I should have questioned why she insisted on cash deposits. But I was in love, planning my dream wedding, and Elena made everything feel effortless. Over the next 6 months, Elena became more than our wedding planner. She became a friend. She'd text me photos of flowers she thought I'd love, called David to discuss music selection, and even helped us navigate a difficult conversation with my mother about the guest list. She remembered that I was lactose intolerant, that David's father had passed away when he was 12, that we'd gotten engaged on a hiking trail in Rocky Mountain National Park. She was perfect. Too perfect, as it turned out. The first red flag came 8 months into our planning process, but I completely missed its significance at the time. I was at work, processing a claim for a house fire in Littleton, when I noticed something odd in the paperwork. The homeowner's signature looked familiar, really familiar. I stared at it for several minutes before it hit me. It looked exactly like Elena's handwriting from all our wedding contracts and notes. I laughed it off. Plenty of people have similar handwriting, right? Besides, the claimant's name was Rebecca Martinez, not Elena Vasquez. Still, something nagged at me as I processed the $340,000 claim for fire damage. That evening, I mentioned it to David over dinner. "You're becoming paranoid from your job," he teased, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Next, you'll be thinking I'm running an insurance scam." "Don't even joke about that," I said, but I was smiling. David's hands were calloused from his physical therapy work, warm and strong. Everything about him felt solid, real, trustworthy. 2 weeks later, Elena called with exciting news. She'd found us the perfect photographer, Marcus Chen, whose portfolio was absolutely stunning. His wedding packages usually started at $8,000, but he was offering us his premium package for $4,500. "He's trying to build his portfolio with high-end weddings," Elena explained. "You two would be doing him a favor, honestly." When I Googled Marcus Chen photography, his website looked professional. His Instagram was full of gorgeous wedding shots, and his reviews were glowing. Everything checked out perfectly. But when I called the phone number on his website to discuss timeline details, a woman answered, "Pinnacle Insurance, how can I help you?" My blood went cold. That was my company's main number. "I'm sorry, I think I dialed wrong," I stammered, hanging up quickly. I checked the number 3 times. I dialed correctly. Marcus Chen Photography's contact number was routing to Pinnacle Insurance's main line. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe there was a glitch with the phone company. Maybe Marcus was using a forwarding service that got crossed with our work number somehow. But deep down, I knew something was very, very wrong. I've always been methodical. It's what makes me good at my job as a claims adjuster. So I decided to approach this like any other investigation, starting with what I could verify independently. First, I looked up Marcus Chen's business license through the Colorado Secretary of State website. No record of any photography business registered under that name. I reverse searched his website domain registration. It had been created just 4 months ago, and the registrant information was hidden behind a privacy service. Then I dug deeper into his social media presence. His Instagram account claimed to have been documenting weddings since 2018, but when I used a tool to check the metadata on his photos, most of them had been uploaded within the past 6 months. The wedding photos he'd posted weren't original content, they were lifted from other photographers' websites and portfolios. Marcus Chen didn't exist. Our wedding photographer was a complete fabrication. My hands were shaking as I sat in my car during lunch break, staring at the evidence on my phone. If Elena had recommended a fake photographer, what else about our wedding planning was fake? That afternoon, I started making phone calls to our other vendors. The florist confirmed our order and deposit. That was real. The venue had us on their books. Also real. But when I called the caterer Elena had recommended, something interesting happened. "Enchanted moments?" the woman said when I asked about Elena. "Oh, honey, we don't work with them anymore. Elena Vasquez owes us almost $15,000 from events she never paid us for. We had to threaten legal action." "When was this?" I asked, my heart pounding. "About 8 months ago. We've been trying to collect ever since. If you're working with her, I'd be very careful about making payments." 8 months ago, right around the time Elena had started planning our wedding. I spent the rest of the afternoon calling every vendor Elena had recommended to us. The pattern was always the same: legitimate businesses that had worked with Elena before, but had stopped due to unpaid bills, canceled events, or mysterious problems with deposits. By 5 p.m., I had filled 12 pages of a legal pad with notes, phone numbers, and dates. Elena wasn't just planning our wedding, she was running some kind of elaborate scam. But I still didn't understand the full scope of what she was doing. That's when I remembered the insurance claim with the familiar handwriting. Working in insurance claims gave me access to databases that most people never see. That evening, after David went to his weekly basketball game, I logged into our company's system from home and started searching. I pulled up the Rebecca Martinez fire claim that had caught my attention weeks earlier. Then I started cross-referencing addresses, phone numbers, and other details from Elena's contact information. What I found made my stomach drop. Rebecca Martinez's listed address was 1247 Columbine Street, Unit 15. Elena's business address, according to her contracts with us, was 1247 Columbine Street, Unit 12. They were in the same building, just 3 units apart. But it got worse. Rebecca Martinez had filed 3 separate insurance claims in the past 2 years. The house fire for $340,000, a theft claim for $89,000 worth of jewelry, and a claim for vandalism damage to her car worth $15,000. Total claimed losses, $444,000. I ran a search on Elena Vasquez's name and found 2 claims filed under that identity as well: a slip-and-fall incident at a grocery store and a claim for damage to her wedding planning equipment during a venue fire. Then I started searching variations of the name: Elena Vasquez, Elena Martinez, Elena Rodriguez, Elena Chen. My computer screen filled with dozens of insurance claims filed across Colorado, Wyoming, and New Mexico over the past 5 years. Different names, different addresses, but always the same signature. Always the same handwriting I'd been staring at on wedding contracts for months. Elena wasn't just a wedding planner. She was a professional insurance fraudster who had perfected the art of creating fake identities, staging losses, and collecting payouts. And somehow, our wedding had become part of her operation. But I still didn't know how or why or what David had to do with any of it. That answer came 3 days later, in the most devastating way possible. I had started taking photos of everything: every contract, every receipt, every text message conversation with Elena. I created a folder on my computer called Wedding Evidence and methodically documented every suspicious detail I'd uncovered. On Thursday evening, while David was at the gym, I decided to go through our home office to see if there were any other wedding-related documents I'd overlooked. We kept all our important papers in a filing cabinet next to David's desk, and I wanted to double-check the copies of everything we'd signed with Elena. That's when I found the folder I'd never seen before, hidden behind our tax documents. It was labeled EV Projects and contained photocopies of at least 30 insurance claim forms, all in Elena's handwriting, all under different identities. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was David's name and signature on half of them. My fiancé, the man I trusted completely, the man I was planning to spend the rest of my life with, was listed as a witness on dozens of fraudulent insurance claims. His physical therapy business letterhead was being used to provide medical documentation for fake injury claims. His professional license number appeared on forms claiming he'd treated patients who, according to my database searches, didn't actually exist. David wasn't just connected to Elena's crimes, he was her partner. I sat on the floor of our home office, surrounded by evidence that my entire relationship was built on lies, and tried to process what this meant. How long had this been going on? How many fake patients had David treated to support Elena's schemes? How much money had they stolen from insurance companies, including the one where I worked? And then the most terrifying question of all, was our entire relationship part of the con? I thought about how we'd met 3 years ago at a coffee shop near my office. David had struck up a conversation about the book I was reading. We'd ended up talking for 2 hours, and he'd asked for my number. It had felt like fate, like the universe bringing together two people who were meant to be. But what if it wasn't fate? What if it was calculated? What if David had targeted me because I worked in insurance claims, because I had access to information that could help their operation? The folder contained one more document that confirmed my worst fears. A handwritten note from Elena to David dated just 6 weeks after we'd started dating. D. The insurance adjuster is working out perfectly. She's already provided inside info on processing times and red flag protocols without realizing it. Keep her close. This could be our biggest opportunity yet. A. I wasn't David's fiancé. I was his mark. For 3 days, I acted like nothing had changed. I kissed David goodbye when he left for work, discussed wedding details with Elena over text, and processed insurance claims at my job as if my world hadn't completely shattered. But internally, I was in full detective mode. I used my access at work to dig deeper into their operation, and what I found was staggering. Elena and David had been running this scam for at least 7 years, stealing an estimated $2.3 million from various insurance companies across 3 states. Their method was sophisticated. Elena would create false identities and stage accidents or losses, while David provided legitimate-looking medical documentation to support injury claims. They'd use real addresses, real phone numbers, and real business relationships to make everything appear authentic. Elena's wedding planning business was the perfect front. It gave her access to vendors, venues, and clients who could serve as unwitting accomplices or provide cover for their activities. But their operation had a fatal flaw. They'd gotten greedy. In the past 18 months, since I'd started dating David, their claims had become more frequent and more expensive. They were using information I'd innocently shared about company procedures, red flags that triggered investigations, and processing timelines to optimize their schemes. I realized that our wedding wasn't just a personal milestone, it was probably going to be their retirement party. One final massive score before they disappeared with their profits. I couldn't let that happen. On Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the FBI field office in downtown Denver. I brought copies of everything: the fraudulent claims, David's medical documentation, Elena's multiple identities, financial records I'd found showing unexplained deposits into David's accounts, and even our wedding planning documents that proved how they'd been recruiting legitimate vendors into their schemes. Special Agent Maria Santos listened to my story for 3 hours, asked detailed questions about timelines and evidence, and then said the words that changed everything. "Miss Thompson, We've been investigating Elena Vasquez for 2 years. You've just provided us with enough evidence to take down her entire network. Apparently, I wasn't the first person to stumble onto Elena's operation. 2 other women had contacted the FBI after discovering that their wedding planners had disappeared with their deposits, but they'd never been able to prove the insurance fraud connection. "We'd like your help with a controlled operation," Agent Santos said. "Are you willing to wear a wire to your final wedding planning meeting?" 1 week later, I sat across from Elena in her office, a tiny recording device hidden under my blouse and FBI agents positioned throughout their building. Elena looked radiant as always. She was wearing a cream-colored blazer, her hair perfectly styled, discussing the final details for our wedding just 6 weeks away. "I have some concerns about our photographer," I said, following the script Agent Santos and I had rehearsed. "I tried to call Marcus Chen's number yesterday and it went to my work voicemail." Elena's smile never wavered, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "That's strange," she said smoothly. "Let me call him right now and figure out what happened." She pulled out her phone and dialed. I watched her face as she pretended to have a conversation with someone, apologizing for the phone mix-up and confirming our timeline. "All sorted," she said, hanging up. "Some issue with his forwarding service. Technology, right?" "Actually, Elena," I said, my heart pounding, "I know Marcus doesn't exist. I know you've been filing fraudulent insurance claims, and I know David has been helping you." The transformation was immediate and chilling. Elena's warm, maternal expression disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. She leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she said finally. "I found the claims, Elena. Rebecca Martinez, Elena Rodriguez, Maria Chen, all you, all fake. I found David's medical reports for patients that don't exist. I found the note you wrote about me being your biggest opportunity." Elena was quiet for several seconds. Then she laughed, not the warm, musical laugh I'd grown accustomed to, but something harsh and bitter. "You know what your problem is, Sarah? You're too trusting, too naive. Do you really think David fell in love with some boring insurance adjuster by accident? Do you think any of this was real?" Each word felt like a physical blow, but I forced myself to keep talking. "How long has it been going on? The insurance fraud?" "Long enough," Elena said. "Long enough to fund a very comfortable lifestyle. Long enough to plan for early retirement. Your wedding was going to be our farewell performance, one last big score before we disappeared." "Our wedding?" Elena smiled, and it was genuinely terrifying. "Honey, there was never going to be a wedding. We've been planning to take your final payment, disappear, and leave you with nothing but debt and heartbreak. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, none of it was ever going to happen. We've done it 6 times before with other clients. But the vendors confirmed everything. They confirmed deposits that will mysteriously disappear once we're gone. They confirmed contracts that will turn out to be forgeries. By the time you figure out you've been scammed, David and I will be in Mexico, living off 7 years of insurance payouts." The room felt like it was spinning. Not only had my relationship been fake, but my wedding, the event I'd been dreaming about for months, was never real either. "Why?" I whispered. "Because it's easy," Elena said, her voice matter-of-fact. "People like you make it so easy. You want to believe in love stories and fairy tale endings, so you don't ask hard questions. You trust pretty words and romantic gestures instead of paying attention to facts." She leaned forward, her eyes cold. "And because people like you have insurance and savings accounts and steady jobs that make you perfect victims, you have just enough money to be worth stealing, but not enough power to fight back effectively." That's when Agent Santos and her team burst through the door. Elena didn't go quietly. As the FBI agents read her rights, she looked directly at me and said, "You have no idea what David is going to do when he finds out you betrayed him." It was a threat, but it was also a gift, because in that moment, I realized I hadn't betrayed David. I'd betrayed the fake version of David that had been lying to me for 3 years. The real David, the criminal who had been using me and planning to destroy my life, was someone I'd never actually known. David was arrested at his physical therapy clinic 3 hours later. According to Agent Santos, he broke down immediately and confessed to everything, trying to claim that Elena had manipulated him into participating, but the evidence showed he'd been an equal partner in their schemes, and had even been the one to suggest targeting women in the insurance industry. The trial took 8 months. During that time, I learned details about their operation that I almost wish I hadn't. They'd targeted 12 different women over 7 years, using fake romances and wedding planning to gain access to personal information, financial accounts, and professional contacts. I wasn't even David's first insurance adjuster girlfriend. There had been another woman in Phoenix, and one in Albuquerque. Both had their lives destroyed when David and Elena disappeared with their wedding deposits and maxed out credit cards they'd opened in their names. Elena was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for insurance fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. David got 12 years, largely because he cooperated with prosecutors and helped them recover some of the stolen money. But here's what the FBI didn't tell me during those long months of preparation and testimony. Recovery isn't just about getting your money back. It's about rebuilding your ability to trust your own judgment. The hardest part wasn't testifying against David or seeing Elena led away in handcuffs. The hardest part was going back through 3 years of my life and trying to figure out what had been real and what had been performance. Had David ever actually loved me, even a little? Were there moments when his feelings were genuine, or had every kiss, every laugh, every quiet morning in bed been calculated manipulation? I spent hours analyzing our text message history, looking for clues I'd missed. I reviewed every gift he'd given me, every trip we'd taken, every milestone we'd celebrated, trying to separate authentic moments from strategic deception. Some things were obviously fake in hindsight. David had never introduced me to his family, claiming they lived in Oregon and were difficult. He'd never let me see his financial records, saying he preferred to keep money separate until after marriage. He'd discouraged me from making friends with his colleagues, claiming he liked to keep his personal and professional life separate. But other things felt genuinely real, which made the betrayal even more confusing. The way he'd held me during movies that made me cry. How he'd surprised me with soup when I was sick with flu. The way he'd listened patiently when I complained about difficult days at work, offering advice that seemed to come from a place of real caring. Maybe the cruelest part of sophisticated manipulation is that it requires the manipulator to understand their victim well enough to provide genuine comfort and connection. David had to study me carefully enough to know exactly what I needed to feel loved, which meant he'd seen parts of my soul that I'd never shared with anyone else. He'd used my deepest vulnerabilities against me, but to do that effectively, he'd had to recognize and understand them first. 6 months after the trial ended, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in helping victims of long-term deception and manipulation. Dr. Rebecca Walsh helped me understand that my experience wasn't unique, that thousands of people every year are targeted by sophisticated con artists who use romantic relationships as cover for financial crimes. The question isn't why you didn't see through the deception, she told me during one of our sessions. The question is how you found the strength to investigate and expose it when you did. 1 year after David's arrest, I got a call from Agent Santos with news I hadn't expected. "Sarah, we've been using the evidence you helped us gather to investigate similar operations across the country," she said. "Your case has led to the arrest of 11 other people running romance and wedding planning scams." It turned out that Elena and David's operation was part of a larger network of criminals who shared information, techniques, and even victim profiles. The FBI had been trying to map these connections for years, but they'd never had someone on the inside who could provide the kind of detailed evidence I'd collected. "You've helped us recover over $4 million for victims," Agent Santos continued. "And more importantly, you've helped us prevent dozens of other people from being targeted." That felt like justice in a way that David's prison sentence never had. But the real victory came 18 months later, when I realized I was happy again. Not happy the way I'd been with David, that euphoric, dependent kind of happiness that required constant validation and attention. This was different, quieter, more solid. I'd moved to a new apartment, started taking salsa dancing classes, adopted a rescue dog named Watson, and even begun dating again. Very carefully, very slowly, with the kind of healthy skepticism that I wished I'd had before. My new relationship is with Marcus, not the fake photographer from my almost wedding, but a real person named Marcus, who teaches high school history and coaches debate team. He's patient with my trust issues, understanding about my need to verify details, and supportive of my volunteer work helping other fraud victims navigate the legal system. Most importantly, he's never once suggested that I should just get over it or move on from what happened with David and Elena. Trauma changes you, he said during one of our early conversations about my experience. The goal isn't to go back to who you were before. The goal is to become someone stronger, smarter, and more connected to your own intuition. People ask me all the time what warning signs I missed and whether there were clues that could have prevented the whole ordeal. The answer is complicated because sophisticated manipulators are experts at providing reasonable explanations for suspicious behavior. But looking back, there were patterns I wish I'd paid attention to. The information gathering. David asked a lot of questions about my work. Not casual interest, but detailed questions about company procedures, claim processing times, and red flags that triggered investigations. At the time, I thought he was just being supportive and interested in my career. The isolation. He was subtly discouraging about my friendships, always finding reasons why we couldn't attend social events or why my friends were drama or negative influences. I lost touch with several close friends during our relationship without realizing it was happening. The financial control. David insisted on handling most of our shared expenses and discouraged me from tracking our spending too carefully. He claimed it was because he was better with money, but it meant I never had a clear picture of our financial situation. The future planning. Looking back, David never made concrete plans for our life after the wedding. When I'd try to discuss things like buying a house, having children, or career goals, he'd deflect with romantic language about living in the moment and not rushing our love story. The emotional dependency. David had a way of making me feel like I needed him to interpret social situations, make decisions, and even understand my own feelings. I gradually lost confidence in my own judgment, which made it harder to trust my instincts when things started feeling wrong. With Elena, the red flags were different but equally telling. The too good to be true pricing. Her rates were significantly lower than her competitors, but she always had plausible explanations. Building her portfolio, preferred vendor relationships, seasonal discounts. The cash preference. Elena strongly preferred cash deposits and payments, claiming it helped her offer better rates by avoiding credit card processing fees. The limited references. When I asked for references from previous clients, Elena provided only 2 names, both from weddings that had happened more than a year earlier. She claimed privacy concerns prevented her from sharing more recent client information. The vendor control. Elena discouraged me from contacting vendors directly, insisting that all communication should go through her to avoid confusion and mixed messages. The urgency creation. Elena frequently created artificial deadlines and pressure to make decisions quickly, claiming that vendors were in high demand or offering limited-time discounts. One of the unexpected gifts of this experience has been connecting with other survivors of similar crimes. There's a whole community of people who've been targeted by romance scammers, wedding fraudsters, and elaborate long-term cons, and we've found strength in sharing our stories. I meet monthly with a support group that includes Jessica, who discovered her fiancé of 2 years was already married to 3 other women in different states, Maria, whose wedding planner disappeared with $40,000 in deposits just weeks before her ceremony, Robert, whose boyfriend of 5 years was using their relationship to run a cryptocurrency investment scam, Linda, whose husband of 15 years had been filing fraudulent disability claims using her medical credentials. What we've learned is that these crimes are far more common than most people realize, and that the psychological impact can be more devastating than the financial losses. When someone uses love as a weapon, it doesn't just steal your money, It steals your ability to trust your own perceptions and emotions. But we've also learned that recovery is possible, and that sharing our experiences can help prevent others from becoming victims. That's why I started a blog called Love Fraud Recovery, where I share practical advice for spotting romance scams, wedding fraud, and other relationship-based crimes. It gets thousands of visitors every month, and I regularly receive emails from people who've recognized warning signs in their own relationships because of something they read on my site. The blog has also connected me with journalists, researchers, and law enforcement officials who are working to understand and combat these crimes. I've been interviewed for podcasts, quoted in news articles, and even consulted on a documentary about romance fraud. It's not the platform I ever expected to have, but it's given meaning to what happened to me. 3 years after David's arrest, my life looks completely different. I still work in insurance claims, but I've specialized in fraud investigation and prevention. My experience with Elena and David's operation made me an expert in spotting the kind of sophisticated schemes that fool traditional detection methods. I've also started dating Marcus seriously. We've been together for 8 months now, and while I'm still cautious about trust and commitment, I'm learning to recognize the difference between healthy skepticism and trauma-based fear. Marcus has met my friends, my family, and even my therapist. He's transparent about his finances, patient with my need to verify information, and understanding about my triggers around deception. When I have flashbacks or moments of doubt, he doesn't take it personally. He just holds space for my healing process. Most importantly, Marcus encourages my independence rather than trying to control or isolate me. He celebrates my work with fraud victims, supports my writing about recovery, and has never once suggested that I should just get over what happened with David and Elena. Our relationship feels fundamentally different from what I had with David. Instead of the intense, consuming passion that left me feeling dependent and vulnerable, this feels steady, respectful, and collaborative. We're building something together rather than one person managing the other's emotions and decisions. I know now that real love doesn't require you to ignore your instincts or silence your questions. Real love doesn't create dependency or isolation. Real love doesn't ask you to stop being yourself in order to maintain the relationship. These might seem like obvious truths, but when you've been systematically manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to exploit your vulnerabilities, relearning healthy relationship dynamics takes time and practice. Last month, I received a letter from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. David was requesting permission to contact me as part of his rehabilitation program. He wanted to apologize and make amends for what he'd done. My first instinct was anger. After 3 years of rebuilding my life, the last thing I wanted was to hear from the person who'd destroyed it. But my therapist encouraged me to consider what kind of closure I might need, and whether hearing from David could be part of my healing process. I decided to read his letter, but not respond. In it, David claimed to have found religion in prison and to genuinely regret the pain he'd caused. He said he thought about me often and wondered if I'd been able to rebuild my life. He asked for forgiveness and said he hoped I'd found happiness with someone who deserved me. The letter felt manipulative in the same subtle ways that David's conversations always had. Even his apology was crafted to make me feel responsible for his emotional well-being, wondering if I'd forgiven him, hoping I'd found happiness, positioning himself as someone who cared about my recovery rather than someone who'd caused my trauma. I showed the letter to several people in my support group, and we talked about the patterns of manipulation that persist even when the manipulator is supposedly reformed. The need to be seen as a good person, the subtle requests for absolution, the focus on the victim's responsibility to heal rather than the perpetrator's responsibility for harm. I chose not to respond, not out of anger, but out of self-protection. David had taken enough of my emotional energy. I didn't owe him forgiveness, reconciliation, or even acknowledgement. Elena, on the other hand, has never attempted to contact me. According to Agent Santos, she's continued to deny responsibility for her crimes and has filed multiple appeals claiming prosecutorial misconduct. She's exactly who I thought she was. Someone who views other people as resources to be exploited rather than human beings deserving of respect and honesty. The difference in their responses has been educational. David's manipulation was personal and emotional, designed to make me feel special and loved so he could exploit my trust. Elena's manipulation was purely transactional. She saw me as a means to an end, and once I was no longer useful, I simply stopped existing in her world. Both approaches caused tremendous damage, but understanding the distinction has helped me recognize similar patterns in other relationships and situations. If someone had told me 4 years ago that my fiancé was a criminal and my wedding planner was running an elaborate insurance fraud scheme, I would have laughed. Not because I thought I was too smart to be fooled, but because I thought people like David and Elena didn't exist in my world. I thought criminals were obvious, desperate, crude, easily spotted by anyone with common sense and good judgment. I had no idea that some of the most devastating crimes are committed by charming, intelligent, well-dressed people who understand exactly how to exploit trust, love, and social expectations. The truth is that any of us can be targeted by sophisticated manipulators. Intelligence, education, and professional success don't protect you from someone who studied human psychology and perfected the art of deception over years or decades. But what I've learned is that recovery isn't just possible. It can make you stronger, smarter, and more connected to your own intuition than you were before. I trust myself now in ways I never did before David. I pay attention to red flags that I would have dismissed as paranoia in the past. I ask hard questions and expect honest answers. I verify information independently, rather than taking people at their word. Most importantly, I've learned that healthy relationships should make you feel more like yourself, not less. They should expand your world, not shrink it. They should encourage your independence, not create dependency. These lessons came at an enormous cost, but they've made me someone I'm proud to be. If you're listening to this story and recognizing patterns in your own relationship, trust your instincts. Ask the hard questions. Verify the information that seems too good to be true. Don't let anyone make you feel crazy for wanting transparency and honesty. And if you're already in the middle of discovering a betrayal like mine, know that recovery is possible. It's not easy, and it's not quick, but it's absolutely possible to rebuild a life that's even better than what you had before. The criminals may have taken your money, your trust, and your sense of security, but they can't take your strength, your intelligence, or your capacity to create genuine connections with people who deserve your love. That's something they'll never understand, and something they can never steal. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you have your own story of recovery from relationship fraud or financial manipulation, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more true crime and relationship recovery stories, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Remember, you are stronger than you know, smarter than they think, and worthy of real love.